linking identity, adversary and goal together in a way that creates a new master frame. That is to say, the values and beliefs pervade do not align under the existing cultural norm or mainstream. A master frame can be seen as a complete way of seeing the world. The zeitgeist, i.e. not the movement, the cultural norm, being the dominant form. We are not single-issue activists. We are not a single-issue activist cause that sits within the existing dominant collective frame of reference. It is primarily the creation of a new master frame, albeit only shared by a minority. Since I've joined the movement, I've seen my whole world change. My entire understanding of what is wrong with the world and what needs to be done has changed. Finding out how money works, where it really came from, who's printing it, who's controlling it, just how much it divides us, we're at first new territory. It was the elephant in the room, it was something my existing frame had not enabled me to see. Only by having an open mind can we move to something new. An open mind enables learning. An open mind enables learning, and importantly, real growth. By being here, primarily, you are engaging in a new frame of reference, a new way of understanding the world. Something you see in the zeitgeist movement, I presume, makes sense to you. Not all of it, perhaps. Of course you have questions and reservations, I do still. But here that's a good thing, and to an extent proves the point. You are here seeking a new frame of reference, or a new understanding to the questions you have. Something is connecting with you, giving you some answers. Maybe not all of a sudden. Put your hand up if this is the case. This movement is about you people, all of us. It is about getting people to understand and share a valid frame of reference. The zeitgeist movement, besides being a name, is something that occurs. It is about the spread of an idea through you and everyone to eventually take its place in the dominant culture of the time. This is how we can understand our growth. This is what is happening. People are here because they identify with our collective frame, the articulated values and beliefs. More specifically, the aforementioned tension of frame is resolved. This is not to say that the world becomes a happier place, but it means that the things we experience in life are congruent to what we know about life, no matter how ugly the picture. This is what is causing our growth. Quite simply, if people didn't, we wouldn't grow. We have grown, so people are. Quite a few, in fact, themselves. From where I stand in this room, it looks anything but empty. Maybe if you're asleep, but... So for the last 10 minutes or so, there are two things to further focus on the sharing of frames, or activism. Because there are a lot of frames out there. People need help choosing, and some people need to know they have a choice. How do we get people to choose a better frame? What can you activists be doing? I'm going to share with you some things I've found to work well that are covered in research. And remember, this can be used whether talking to one person, or designing activist events, producing products such as leaflets or films, planning resource-based dinner parties, or whatever it is that gets you folks going. Does that sound relevant? Yeah. Like this. Just say yes anyway. It makes me feel good and stop staring at it. Frame analysis. Let's stick with science then. These are two elements of frame analysis that are used for the direct purpose of understanding how social movements grow. I've adapted it for presentation's sake. If anybody wants the actual journals or references for the materials used, I'm happy to provide it. Frame validity is about the integrity of the frame. Hence, as activists, this is essentially about you going out there and checking that people's frames work, giving them a nice shiny new pair if theirs are broken. Now, this isn't about you going out there and saying that you know best, that your frame is the right frame. This inevitably results in disagreements. This is about science, and it is about using science as a third person, a neutral party. It is something we can use to understand and identify a common ground. Also, it takes the I out of the argument, the me versus you. It is a method, not a person. And on many levels, we've all been using it for many years. We just don't give it the credit it is due, or for that fact, the responsibility it can handle. As Jack Fresco implies, science is the closer approximation to the way the world really works. It's telling the truth. Science doesn't try to get along with people, it tells them what their findings are. Although at first the Zeitgeist movement and Venus Project presented as new to me, in time I came to see that it was not entirely. The application of science for social concern is something that has been in the making for hundreds of years. For me, this is a modern day re-emergence of an enlightenment movement. This is an ongoing struggle. There have been many attempts throughout these years. Hopefully this time we will succeed. It has at its core the notion that no longer do we need to be guessing and making things up, or doing things according to one particular person or group's frame. We have science as a means to find out what is, and hence to arrive at decisions instead of making them. Today, we must renew the tradition that emerged in the 19th century in the scientific field, says Bourdieu, which refuses to leave the world to the blind forces of economics and seeks to extend to the entire social world the values of the scientific universe. Bourdieu is talking about monetary economics here, for him in particular neoliberal forms. Of course, Bourdieu doesn't extend to the removal of money as a root cause, but he does make some good points. Wilkinson refers to him heavily in the spirit. He also highlights something that needs to occur in order for social movements to really have an impact. Remembering the initial notion of collective action and frames being a means to organise collective experience, Bourdieu speaks of releasing the energy stored within the scientific city. By this he means science is held behind closed doors. It is restricted in its application, drawn on by politicians when it suits them, ignored when it does not. This is true of all self-referential belief systems. This containment needs to stop. As a species, we are denying ourselves the full support of our closest ally, science. We must work together to design new forms of organisation, capable of bringing together researchers and activists, in a work of collective critique and proposition, leading to novel forms of mobilisation and action. Social movements, in particular ones in the global era, have often been criticised. Their frame of reference has been challenged. For example, they have often been called ignorant protectionists who offer no alternatives and are unworthy of serious attention. Remember, identity, adversary, goal. Movements have often been seen to lack any viable goal or alternative, in addition to subjective definitions of a problem. This is not the case with us, nor must it be able to. As activists, we need to combine our principles and actions with research, the use of evidence. This is about protest adopting a valid frame with regards to an identity, adversary, goal. Again, this is what is causing our growth. It must be a frame that can be challenged, tested for falsification and hence for validity. Falsification just means that other people must be able to conduct the same tests and get the same results. They cannot exist only in the individual's experience. Likewise, something that was once seen to have been proved must stand the test of time. If surpassed, it goes. As activists, we are seeking to challenge what people believe. In no way do we seek to make everyone the same. But science, as a method, is a way to make sure that what people see, what they believe, and how we collectively organise ourselves is based on what we know, not what we think we know. We can test frames in many ways. When we think about our approach in activism, we need to think about how we can challenge people's values and beliefs. We can ask questions that are designed to highlight flaws, cracks, and gaps in the existing frame. For me, I often find myself asking people, where does money come from? How come some have so much and others have so little? Do they really work that much harder? Who is the Bank of England? What do financiers actually produce as a value? Why is so much money spent on wars when it could easily solve all material problems on Earth? It is about taking people to the edge of their frame, about getting them to think outside of the box, to see things that their frame doesn't normally enable them to see, prompt questions that they wouldn't normally ask. On our side is the fact that the world is going to shift. Not that this is a good thing, but as we discussed earlier, people are beginning to ask questions on their own. But also we can help facilitate these questions. As I said, we don't have much time. But nonetheless, once an established wealth system begins to decompose, social instability moves with chaotic effects. Questions of who we are come to the fore. Now, this can mean the whole world, literally, or it can mean the world of peoples, their individual or collective frames of reference. The only thing that can prevent this is the integrity of the frame, the validity, how well it holds up when it truly gets tested. Frame articulator, frame consistency, and empirical viability are all terms found in the science of frame validity. The better the movements, the more its growth potential. Likewise, the weaker the frame, not necessarily the individuals, but the dominant form that they are found under, or the movements, the more likely holes are to appear, and hence alternative directions sought. It is about what people claim, their statements of truth, and their actions. We can think of the movements frame, the dominant political frame, the individual frame. Peter, or anyone in the movement, has never asked me for anything. All materials produced and information are made available for free. Today has just been about covering expenses. In fact, I know that the creation of the materials for the movement, such as the film, the DVDs given out, the pamphlets, come at considerable cost to the people who produce them. Yet nothing is asked for other than your help. Compare this with other frame articulators who ask, who take so much, yet what is given in return? As activists, we are seeking to challenge people, to show the limits of the existing frame. We are looking to expose weaknesses in the dominant frame of the time, the zeitgeist. We are looking to raise questions about what is possible, I mean really possible. We are looking to promote science as a way to discover this. Okay, let's move on, number 2, and talk about frame bridging. In just a second. Okay. As we discussed earlier, the construction and maintenance of one's frame happens over the course of a life. During this time, often because of our own experiences, we come to find ourselves sympathising with one particular concern or trouble. For me, it was the struggle and disadvantage of the young people growing up in the poorest sections of society. As we go through this exercise, maybe you could just think about yours in that circle there, maybe the thing that you sympathise with most in society. For me, initially, working with these young people directly was seen as a solution, to try and help them break out of their predicament. I've worked in many places, but predominantly for a charity that housed young homeless people. We would try and support them, work with them to build their independence, and eventually move them on to somewhere better. This was my frame of reference. That was my understanding of the problem. Remember identity, the adversary goal? This was my identification of a problem and my goal, and what I thought should be done. Key elements of frame were missing. Hence, the aforementioned frame tension. Key elements of frame were missing. Hence, the aforementioned tension earlier. What was causing the problem was absent from my frame. I could talk about my experiences today, as they're truly tragic. But for now, I will have to highlight one thing that I learned. No matter how many homeless young people I truly managed to help, and even admitting it's relatively few, it never seemed to alter the fact that there was always a queue of young, homeless, neglected, and often abused children arriving at the door. It became apparent in time that this approach was purely reactive. That is to say, it was doing nothing for the actual cause of the problem. Furthermore, and what became even more apparent, was that not only was it not addressing the cause,